When I inherited my wife's house and savings $1.5 million, I quietly moved everything into a protected trust. Just in case. Last Monday, my son showed up with his wife dangling a key that was not hers, smiling cold. "We already have the paperwork. You have until Friday to get out." I just smiled back. "Are you sure about that?" 2 days later, they returned with a moving truck. But they froze the moment they saw who was already waiting on the porch. "Welcome to Silent Sweet Revenge. I'm truly grateful you're here. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Note this story includes fictional elements for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to names or settings is coincidental, but the life lesson remains deeply impactful. My name is Walter Grayson. I am 72 years old. I spent 40 years building furniture for other people's homes, and every knot in every piece of oak I ever worked told me the same thing: the grain does not lie. You can sand it, stain it, finish it any way you like. But if you look close enough, the grain always tells you exactly what the wood went through to become what it is. I thought about that on Monday morning when I stood behind my screen door and watched my son climb out of a rented moving truck on Elmwood Drive. Derek was wearing work gloves. Actual work gloves, the kind you pull on when you mean business, when you want to look like a man who has earned what he is about to take. His wife Amber stepped down from the passenger side behind him, one hand gripping a manila folder thick enough to matter the other, closing around a key that did not belong to her. She was wearing her real estate smile, the one she reserves for open houses and closing tables, wide and warm and worth absolutely nothing. There were two men with them. Movers. They had the flat, patient look of men who get paid by the hour and have learned not to ask questions about the houses they walk into. The four of them made it exactly halfway up my front walk before they stopped. Because sitting on the porch swing, my wife Maggie picked out at a church sale 31 years ago was a man in a charcoal gray suit, holding a thermos of black coffee and a folder of his own. Harold Brandt, attorney at law, 71 years old, had been sitting on that swing since 7:15 in the morning. He looked like he had been sitting there since 1987. He had that particular stillness that certain men develop after decades of watching other people make expensive mistakes in front of them. Harold did not stand up when they froze on the walkway. He simply looked at them over the rim of his thermos, the way a man watches weather roll in across a flat Iowa field, with patience, with accuracy, and with absolutely no surprise. I watched Derek's face go through 5 different expressions in 4 seconds. Confusion first, because he had expected a frightened old man, not a lawyer in a suit. Then recognition, because Derek had met Harold twice over the years, at family functions, and knew enough to understand what it meant when your father's attorney shows up before you do. Then something shifted behind his eyes that I can only describe as the look of a man realizing the floor he stepped onto is not the floor he thought it was. Amber's reaction was different. Amber's hand tightened around that key until her knuckles went white and her real estate smile did not disappear so much as it recalculated. She was a broker. She understood immediately that the presence of legal counsel on a front porch at 7:45 in the morning meant the transaction she had spent 4 months engineering had just become something else entirely. At the curb, leaning against his cruiser with his arms folded and his expression professionally neutral, stood Deputy Ray Morrison. He was not there to arrest anyone. He was there the way a period is there at the end of a sentence to make clear that the sentence is finished. My neighbor Frank Delaney was watering the rose bushes along his fence line. Frank has been my neighbor for 30 years. Those rose bushes had been watered thoroughly an hour ago. Frank waters them twice on days when something worth watching is happening on Elmwood Drive, and he has never once pretended otherwise. One of the movers looked from Harold to Deputy Morrison to Derek, and back again, silently doing the arithmetic of his hourly rate against whatever this situation was becoming. The arithmetic apparently did not favor him because he took one step backward toward the truck. Harold set his thermos on the arm of the swing. He stood up the way men with 71-year-old knees stand up in stages with intention, without apology. He straightened his jacket. He picked up his folder, squared the edges against his palm, and walked to the top of the porch steps. His voice when he spoke was the same voice I had heard for 35 years across conference tables and courtroom hallways. Measured, unhurried, carrying to every corner of the yard without being raised even slightly. "Good morning," Harold said. "Which one of you is Derek?" Derek raised his hand like a man in school who is not entirely sure he wants the teacher to notice him. Amber opened her mouth. Harold raised one finger. Not a rude gesture, not aggressive, simply the unhurried, absolute gesture of a man who has spent 4 decades listening to people talk themselves into worse positions and who has learned exactly when to stop them. Amber closed her mouth. Standing behind my screen door, I pressed my hand flat against the wooden frame, the frame I rehung myself 11 years ago, because the original had warped, because in this house things that broke got fixed by the person who lived here, not by whoever happened to want the house next. I could feel the grain of the wood under my palm. Even painted, even after all these years, I could feel it. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant standing there. I want to tell you it felt like winning. But what I actually felt watching my son stand frozen on the front walk of the home where I taught him to ride a bicycle, where his mother hung Christmas lights every December without fail, where we ate 30 years of Sunday dinners at a table I built with my own hands. What I actually felt was the particular weight of a grief I had been carrying since October. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the quiet, settled ache of a man who had hoped for a different story and had received instead the true one. This is that story. And it begins not on a Monday morning in March, but on a Tuesday night in October when I opened the wrong drawer looking for an insurance policy number and found something my wife had left me that she never once mentioned while she was alive. Maggie used to say that a house knows when something is wrong before the people inside it do. She said it first, the winter our furnace gave out at 2 in the morning, when the silence woke her before the cold did. She said it again, the spring the elm tree in the backyard split down the middle in a storm that came out of nowhere. I always told her she was being superstitious. She always told me I measured everything in board feet and missed the point entirely. She was usually right. Margaret Ellen Grayson died on a Thursday in October, 3 weeks before the leaves finished falling. She was 69 years old, and she went the way she lived without making a fuss about it, without asking anyone to rearrange their schedule, slipping away in the early morning hours in the upstairs bedroom of the house on Elmwood Drive, while I was downstairs making coffee. I did not yet know she would not be there to drink. We had been married 41 years. I am not going to spend a long time telling you what those 41 years felt like because some things do not translate into words without losing something essential in the process. What I will tell you is this. Maggie was the kind of woman who remembered which of the neighbors' kids had a peanut allergy and which one was afraid of dogs. She kept a running list in a little green notebook of every library book she had ever checked out, every movie we had ever seen together, every restaurant where something had been particularly good. Not for any reason. Just because she believed that a life worth living was a life worth tracking. She also believed, apparently, in keeping certain things to herself until she decided the time was right. The funeral was held on a gray Saturday at Cedar Falls Community Church, where Maggie had sung in the choir for 22 years, despite what she cheerfully described as a voice like a screen door in the wind. The church was full. I stood at the entrance for 2 hours, shaking hands with people I had never met, people who told me Maggie had brought them a casserole after surgery, or remembered their mother's birthday, or stayed on the phone with them for an hour during a bad night. Every story surprised me. Every story also sounded exactly like her. Derek drove up from Des Moines with Amber and their son Tyler. Derek wore a dark suit that did not quite fit across the shoulders, the way suits never quite fit men who do not wear them often. He hugged me at the reception, held on a few seconds longer than usual, and said, "Dad, I'm so sorry." His voice cracked on the last word. I believed him. I want to be clear about that because it matters to everything that came after. In that moment, standing in the fellowship hall with bad coffee and good intentions all around us, I believed my son's grief was real. Amber stood beside him in a black dress, appropriate and composed. She squeezed my hand and said the things people say. I thanked her the way you thank people when you are operating on 4 hours of sleep and the shock of a quiet house. Our neighbor Frank Delaney stood near the back, holding his hat in both hands, the way men of his generation hold hats at funerals, as though the hat itself needs comforting. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a single nod that said everything a 20-minute conversation could not have. Caroline Marsh sat in the fourth pew from the front. Caroline was 45 years old, the daughter of a woman Maggie had befriended at a garden club 20 years ago. Over time, she had become something else. She showed up to help Maggie put up storm windows. Every October, she learned Maggie's recipe for buttermilk pie through 3 years of patient instruction. She called on Tuesday evenings just to talk. She was not family by blood or paperwork. She was family by every measure that actually counts. She cried openly during the service, pressing a folded tissue to the corner of her eye. And I was grateful for it, because some grief is too large to sit still inside a person, and it helps to see someone else let theirs move. After the burial, after the casseroles were logged, and the relatives had driven back to wherever relatives drive back to, I walked into the house alone for the first time. I sat in Maggie's chair at the kitchen table, the one with the slight wobble on the left rear leg that she had never let me fix, because she said she liked knowing which chair was hers without having to look. The coffee mug she had used that last Thursday morning was still in the dish rack. I had washed it without thinking, the way you do when your hands know a routine your mind has not yet caught up to. The house was so quiet, it had a sound of its own. I sat there for a long time. Then I did what any reasonable 72-year-old man does when the person who managed every important piece of paper for 4 decades is suddenly gone. I went looking for the insurance policy number I needed to call in the morning. Maggie kept her important documents in the second drawer of the roll-top desk in the study, a desk I had built for her the year Derek was born out of cherry wood, with small brass pulls on each drawer. I opened the second drawer. Behind the insurance folder, behind the tax returns, behind the envelope labeled utilities, in Maggie's precise schoolteacher handwriting, my fingers found a second envelope I had never seen before. It was sealed. My name was written on the front in Maggie's hand. Not Walt, the way she usually wrote it. The full name, Walter. She only ever wrote my full name on things she wanted me to take seriously. My chest tightened the way it does when you reach for a familiar piece of wood and find the grain has run in a direction you did not expect. I set the envelope on the desk. I looked at it for a full minute without touching it. Then I went to the kitchen, poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass I did not remember taking from the cabinet, and came back. I sat down in the desk chair. I picked up the envelope, and I opened it. The envelope contained 2 documents and a handwritten note on Maggie's good stationery, the cream-colored paper she saved for things that mattered. I read the note first. It was dated the previous April, 7 months before she died. Her handwriting was steady the way it always was, the particular steadiness of a woman who had been a church secretary for 18 years and believed that how you put words on a page said something about how seriously you took them. She wrote, "Walt. If you are reading this, then I did not get around to sitting down with you the way I meant to. There are things I did quietly because I did not want to have a long conversation about them while I was still here to argue with you. The documents behind this note will explain most of it. Harold Brandt has the originals. Call him before you call anyone else. I mean that. Anyone else. I love you more than the cherry desk, more than the house, more than any of it. But I also love you enough to do this without asking your permission. M. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down and picked up the first document. It was a transfer on death deed for the house at Elmwood Drive, the 1952 Craftsman with the wraparound porch and the basement workshop, where I had spent 30 years making sawdust and listening to baseball on the radio. A transfer on death deed, for anyone who has not encountered one, works exactly the way it sounds. The owner of a property signs a document while they are living that names who receives that property the moment they die. No probate court, no delays, no lawyers fighting over the language of a will in a conference room somewhere. The property transfers directly, automatically, like a key passing from one hand to another. Maggie had signed this deed 4 years ago. The named beneficiary was me, not Derek, not the two of us jointly. Me alone by name. The house on Elmwood Drive was appraised at $895,000. The second document was a payable on death designation form for the joint investment account Maggie and I had built over 30 years of careful, unglamorous saving money, market contributions, reinvested dividends, the occasional lump sum when a good year allowed it. A payable on death designation works the same way as the deed. The account bypasses probate entirely and transfers directly to the named beneficiary upon death. Maggie had updated this designation 4 years ago as well. The named beneficiary was me. The account balance as of the previous quarter was $680,000. I sat in the desk chair I had been sitting in for 20 years and looked at those 2 numbers until they stopped being numbers and became something else. $895,000. $680,000. $1,575,000 total passing from my wife directly to me, skipping our son's generation, entirely as clean and as final as a deed of sale. My hands were not steady the way Maggie's handwriting was steady. They pressed flat against the desk surface, against the cherry wood grain I had smoothed myself, and I breathed the way my doctor had told me to breathe, when my blood pressure climbed slow, deliberate in through the nose. The clock on the study wall said 11:42. I picked up the phone and called Harold Brandt. He answered on the second ring, which told me he had been expecting the call for some time. "Harold," I said. I found the envelope. There was a pause on his end that had 35 years of shared history in it. Then he said, "Walter, yes. Are you sitting down?" "I've been sitting down for an hour." "Good." I heard him settle into his own chair, the familiar creak of old leather I recognized from 3 decades of meetings in his office. "Then let me tell you what Margaret asked me to do, and why she asked me to do it the way she did." Harold explained it, the way he explained everything, without rushing, without condescending, in the plain language of a man who has spent a career translating legal machinery into terms that actual human beings can use. 4 years ago, Maggie had come to his office alone. She had not told me she was going. She had sat across from Harold's desk and told him she wanted to restructure the transfer of their assets in a way that protected me specifically. She was very clear. Harold said about what she was protecting you from. She did not use the word threat. She used the word pattern. She said she had been watching a pattern for 3 years, and she did not like where it was heading. "She never said a word to me," I said. "No." Harold agreed. "She said you would want to talk to Derek about it directly, and that talking to Derek about it directly would accomplish nothing, except making Derek careful. She wanted the protection in place before anyone knew to be careful. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth for a moment. Outside, the October wind moved through the elm trees along the drive, the same sound it had made every October for 41 years. Derek doesn't know, I said. It was not a question. As far as I am aware, Harold said carefully. Derek knows that his mother passed away and that there will be some process of settling the estate. He does not know the specifics of what Margaret arranged. I looked at the two documents on the desk, at Maggie's note with its steady, deliberate handwriting, at the number $1,575,000 sitting in the lamplight, like something that had always been there waiting for me to find it. Harold, I said, I need some time to think. Of course. But I want you to know I'm not going to say anything to Derek yet. I want to watch for a while. Another pause. Then Harold said in the tone he uses when he thinks a client is making the right call, but wants them to arrive at it independently. That seems reasonable, Walter. People tend to show you exactly who they are when they think the question of money is still open. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in the study for another hour. Then I walked to the kitchen, stood at the sink, and looked out at the backyard where Maggie's garden was going brown at the edges, the way it did every November, the way it had done every November for as long as I could remember. She had known something I did not know. She had acted on it quietly alone without asking me, and she had left me a note on good stationery explaining that she loved me more than the house. I folded the note carefully along its original crease and put it back in the envelope. I did not call Derek that night. I did not call him the next morning either. I waited, and within 2 weeks I did not have to wonder any more what I was waiting for. Derek called on a Sunday evening 2 weeks after the funeral, while I was eating leftover chicken soup that Caroline had dropped off the day before. Dad, he said, Amber and I have been talking. We don't think you should be alone out there. I told him I was fine. You just lost Mom, he said. Nobody's fine after that. We want to come up more, just to check in, help around the house, keep you company. Would that be okay? I told him that would be fine too. And it was at first. They came the following Friday evening, Derek and Amber together pulling into the driveway in Amber's silver SUV with a bag of groceries and a bottle of red wine they knew I would not finish. Derek had a way of moving through the house that first visit that I can only describe as careful, the way a man moves when he is trying to take up less space than usual, when he is aware of being watched and wants to make a good impression. He hung his coat on the hook by the door without being asked. He asked before he opened the refrigerator. Amber set the groceries on the counter and started unpacking them, with the efficient, cheerful energy of a woman who is very good at making herself at home in spaces that are not hers. We brought stuff for pasta, she said, already opening cabinet doors to find a pot. Derek said it was always one of your favorites. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her move through Maggie's kitchen with a comfort that was slightly too immediate, and I told myself I was being uncharitable. The woman was trying. That had to count for something. Derek sat across from me while Amber cooked, and we talked the way fathers and sons talk when they have run out of the easy things and have not yet decided whether to attempt the hard ones. We talked about the weather, about a leak in the garage roof I had been meaning to patch, about his job managing a distribution center in Des Moines that I understood in only the broadest terms. He asked about my health. He asked whether I had been sleeping. Better than I expected, I said. He nodded like a man filing information away. That's good, Dad. That's really good. Amber served the pasta at 7:30, and it was genuinely excellent. She had found Maggie's good serving bowls without asking where they were, which meant she had looked through the cabinets more thoroughly than the cooking required. But I noted that and set it aside. After dinner, Derek washed the dishes without being asked, which, in 33 years of fatherhood, I could count on one hand the number of times he had done voluntarily. When I pointed this out, he laughed a real laugh, and for a moment, he looked so much like the 12-year-old who used to help me sand chair legs in the workshop on Saturday mornings that something in my chest pulled in a direction I was not prepared for. "I'm trying, Dad," he said quietly, handing me a dried bowl to put away. "I know I haven't always been great at showing up. I'm trying to be better." I believed him in the way you believe someone when the evidence is standing right in front of you doing dishes on a Friday night. I wanted to believe him. I think that is the more accurate thing to say. There is a difference between belief and want, and I have not always been careful enough about which one I am operating on. They came back the following Tuesday, then the Saturday after that, then twice the week after. The visits settled into a rhythm that felt from the outside like exactly what it appeared to be: a son and his wife showing up for a grieving father, bringing food and conversation, and the particular comfort of not being alone in a house that had recently become too quiet. Frank Delaney noticed before I was ready to admit there was anything to notice. We were playing chess on my back porch on a Thursday afternoon, the way we had done every Thursday for 11 years, when Frank set down his bishop and said without looking up from the board, "Derek's been over a lot lately." "He has," I said. "That's new." "People change after a loss," I said. Frank moved his bishop. "Sometimes they do," he said. "Sometimes they just get more efficient about things they already wanted." I looked at him across the board. Frank Delaney had been a high school history teacher for 34 years before he retired, and he had developed over those decades a particular talent for asking the question that was sitting in the middle of the room that everyone else was stepping around. "You think something's off?" I said. "I think," Frank said carefully, picking up his coffee mug, "that your son has called you more in the last 3 weeks than in the previous 3 years. And I think that's either the best thing grief ever did for a family, or it's something else, and I don't know which one it is yet." He took a sip. "Do you—" I looked at my side of the chessboard for a long moment. The afternoon light came low and flat across the yard, the way it does in November in Iowa, giving everything a temporary borrowed quality, as though the light itself knew it was only passing through. "Not yet," I said. "But I think I'm about to find out." I moved my rook. Frank studied the board. Neither of us said anything else about Derek, but the question stayed on the porch with us the way questions do when neither person is ready to answer them and both people know the answer is coming anyway. 3 days later, Amber sat down at my kitchen table and started asking about the house. Amber had a way of asking questions that made them sound like concern. It was a professional skill, I realized later. When you spend your working life walking strangers through the largest financial transaction of their lives, you learn to wrap the numbers in warmth. You learn to make a person feel heard before you make them feel obligated. She started with the easy ones. "Walter, how are you sleeping up here?" she asked, wrapping both hands around her coffee mug the way people do when they want to look settled, unhurried, like a person with nowhere else to be. She had taken to using my first name in recent weeks, dropping the dad she had used at the funeral, as though the shift in address was a shift in the nature of the visit. I had not asked her to stop. I noted it the way I noted everything those days, quietly, without reaction. The way you note a knot in a board before you decide how to work around it. "Fine," I said. "Better than I expected." "That's so good." She nodded warmly. "This house holds a lot of memories. I think being surrounded by all of that helps, honestly. But it can also be a lot to maintain, right, for one person." I've maintained it for 40 years, I said. She laughed softly. Of course you have. You built half of it yourself. She glanced around the kitchen with an expression I was learning to read, the slight pause at the window, trim, the brief calculation behind her eyes when they crossed the square footage of the open living room. It's just such a beautiful home. You know, in this market, a property like this on Elmwood Drive would move in under 2 weeks. I'm not looking to move it, I said. Oh, of course not. She waved her hand. I just mean it's worth knowing, as information, for planning purposes. She paused, resettling her coffee mug on the table. Did Margaret leave a will? By the way, I don't mean to pry. I just know that when there isn't one, things can get complicated for the family. We had documents, I said. Sure, sure. She nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are absorbing an answer and already forming the next question. And the house it's still in both your names? Because sometimes with older properties, that transfer process can be, unclear, especially if there wasn't recent legal work done. Amber, I said. She looked up. Would you like more coffee? A beat passed. Her smile recalibrated so smoothly I almost missed it. I'd love some, she said. Thank you. I got up, poured her coffee, set it in front of her, and sat back down. I had spent 40 years building things with my hands, and I knew the difference between a structural question and a decorative one. Every question Amber had just asked me was structural. She was not asking about my sleep or my memories or my well-being. She was asking who owned this house and whether the paperwork was clean enough to move quickly. I did not answer any of those questions. But I listened to all of them, and I remembered every word. Derek was in the living room during this conversation, ostensibly reading something on his phone. I say ostensibly because I noticed he had not scrolled once in the past 4 minutes. He was listening without appearing to listen, which was its own kind of answer to Frank's question from 3 days ago. Caroline Marsh arrived at 2 in the afternoon, the way she had arrived at this house every few weeks for the past decade, with a container of something she had made, and the uncomplicated intention of sitting with whoever needed sitting with. That day, it was a pecan coffee cake, Maggie's recipe, which Caroline had been making from memory since the 3rd year Maggie taught it to her. She came through the back door the way she always had, called out, "It's me," into the kitchen, and stopped when she saw Amber at the table. "Oh," Caroline said pleasantly. "I didn't know you had company." "Derek and Amber are here," I said. "You remember Amber?" "Of course." Caroline set the coffee cake on the counter and smiled at Amber with the genuine, uncomplicated warmth of a woman who had not yet been given a reason to do otherwise. "It's good that you're spending time with Walter." Amber smiled back with equal warmth and considerably more calculation behind it. "Family takes care of family," she said. Caroline caught my eye for just a fraction of a second. I gave her nothing to work with because I had nothing to give yet. But she was a perceptive woman. She had learned most of what she knew about reading a room from 20 years of friendship with Maggie, and Maggie had been a precise and careful teacher. After Derek and Amber left that evening, Caroline stayed to help me cut the coffee cake. We sat at the kitchen table in the easy silence of people who have known each other long enough that silence is a form of conversation. She asked about the house, Caroline said. It was not a question. She did, I said. Caroline cut a second piece, set it on my plate without asking if I wanted it. What are you going to do? I'm going to think, I said. And I'm going to watch. Caroline nodded the way Frank had nodded 3 days ago. The nod of someone who trusts you to handle a thing, but wants you to know you do not have to handle it entirely alone. Maggie would have seen this coming a mile away, Caroline said quietly. She did, I said. Caroline looked at me carefully across the table. I could see her filing that away, deciding not to push further. She picked up her fork, outside on Elmwood Drive. Amber's silver SUV pulled away from the curb. I watched the taillights until they turned the corner, and I thought about what Frank had said on the porch. Sometimes people just get more efficient about things they already wanted. I was starting to understand exactly how efficient Amber could be. Amber suggested Thanksgiving at my house the way she suggested most things, as though the idea had just occurred to her, and she was sharing it out of pure generosity. "It would be good for you, Walter," she said over the phone the week before. "You shouldn't be alone on your first Thanksgiving without Margaret. Let us bring everyone to you. You won't have to do a thing." I told her that sounded fine. What I did not tell her was that I had already called Frank, and Frank was coming at noon to eat leftover chili and watch football the way we had done 3 Thanksgivings in a row when his daughter lived in Portland, and my family lived in the comfortable myth of their own intentions. But I rescheduled Frank for the following Sunday because I wanted to see what Amber meant by everyone. Everyone turned out to be 14 people. Derek's college roommate and his wife, 2 of Amber's cousins from Cedar Rapids, a couple from their neighborhood in Des Moines, whose connection to our family I never quite established, and several relatives I recognized from Christmas cards, but had not seen in years. They arrived in waves between noon and 1 o'clock, filling the house with the noise and movement of people who are performing closeness rather than feeling it. Amber moved through it all like a conductor. She had brought the turkey pre-cooked and sliced along with 4 side dishes in matching ceramic containers that she unpacked with the efficiency of a catering service. She directed traffic in my kitchen with the ease of a woman who had mentally redecorated it 3 weeks ago. When she opened the wrong cabinet looking for serving spoons and found my collection of wood-handled tools. Instead, she laughed and said, "Walter, we need to talk about your kitchen organization." And 2 of her cousins laughed with her. I smiled. I am good at smiling when the situation requires it. The meal itself was loud and warm and not unpleasant. People told stories passed. Dishes complimented the house in the way people compliment houses when they are imagining them differently. Derek sat at the head of the table in the chair that had been mine for 40 years and did not appear to notice, or if he noticed, did not appear to think it required comment. I sat at the side. Amber took photographs throughout the meal. This was not unusual. People photograph everything now, every plate of food, every gathering, every moment they want to appear to have had. What I noticed was the angle. She moved around the table with her phone crouching slightly, adjusting, and every photograph she took found a way to include Derek, to include the dining room with its original 1952 woodwork, to include the bay window and the garden beyond it, going brown in the November light. In the 40 minutes I watched her take those photographs, I appeared in exactly 2 of them, and in both I was partially blocked by the centerpiece, an arrangement of dried wheat and orange candles that Amber had brought and placed without asking. After dessert, while I was in the kitchen cutting the second pie, I heard her in the dining room. Her voice had the particular carrying quality of someone who is not bothering to lower it because they assume the person they are discussing cannot hear them from where they are standing. "The bones of this place are incredible," she was saying to one of her cousins. "Original hardwood throughout, the craftsman detailing on the trim that porch in this zip code staged right. You are looking at 900 plus easy." "Is Walter thinking of selling?" her cousin asked. "We're working on it," Amber said. I set down the pie knife. I picked it back up. I cut 2 clean slices and put them on plates and carried them into the dining room and set them in front of Amber and her cousin, and said, "Pie," in the voice I use when I want to sound like a man who heard nothing. Amber thanked me with a full smile. That evening, after the guests had gone and Derek was loading the dishwasher, I sat in my chair by the front window and watched Amber on the porch with her phone. She was posting. I could see the glow of the screen on her face, the small adjustments she made to find the right light. She stayed out there for 11 minutes. I looked up the post later that night on the tablet Caroline had set up for me the previous Christmas. It was a photograph of the dining room table full of food and people and candlelight warm and golden the way Thanksgiving photographs are supposed to look. The caption read, "Home for the holidays. Grateful for family and this beautiful house." I was not in the photograph. The beautiful house was in every corner of it. Derek came to find me in the study around 8 o'clock after Amber had gone to put the leftovers away. "Good day, Dad," he asked, leaning in the doorway. "Good day," I said. He nodded, satisfied with that, and went back to the kitchen. He was a man who had learned to hear what he wanted to hear, and I had spent a lifetime making it easy for him by saying things that could be interpreted either way. I opened the drawer of the cherry desk. I took out Harold's business card, which I had moved there from my wallet 3 weeks ago, for reasons I had not fully articulated to myself at the time. I set it on the desk surface and looked at it. Then I opened the desk drawer again and took out Maggie's note. I unfolded it along its original crease. I read the last line one more time. "I love you enough to do this without asking your permission." I folded it back up. I put Harold's card in my shirt pocket. The following weekend, Amber arrived at the house wearing Maggie's red coat. I need to tell you about the red coat before I tell you about anything else, because the red coat is the thing that changed the temperature of all of it for me. Maggie had owned that coat for 19 years. She bought it at a small shop in Iowa City the winter Derek was finishing high school, paid more for it than she typically allowed herself, and justified the expense by wearing it every single year from the first cold Saturday in October until the last cold Saturday in March. It was a deep wool red, the color of something permanent, with large buttons that she kept polished, and a collar she always turned up slightly on the left side because of the way the wind came off the river on our street. I had seen that coat so many times that I stopped seeing it the way you stop seeing the grain in a piece of furniture you built yourself. It became part of the background of our life together, part of what Maggie looked like when she was alive and present and moving through the world. After she died, I could not open that side of the closet. Not for weeks. The coat hung there in the dark, with everything else she had left behind, and I left the closet door closed, because some things you approach gradually, or you do not approach them at all. Caroline called me at 11:30 that Saturday morning. Her voice had a careful, measured quality that I recognized as the voice people use when they are trying to give you information without alarming you before you have had a chance to prepare yourself. "Walter," she said, "I'm coming over this afternoon, but I wanted to call first because Derek's car is in your driveway, and I just saw something through your front window that I think you should know about before I get there." My chest went very still. "Tell me," I said. "Amber is wearing Margaret's red coat," Caroline said. "She has it on inside the house." I thanked Caroline and hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a moment with the phone in my hand. Then I walked to the front hallway and opened the coat closet. There was a gap on the left side where the red coat had been. I stared at that gap for a long time. The empty hanger was still there, tilted slightly, the way hangers tilt when something has been removed from them in a hurry or without particular care. I walked into the living room. Amber was sitting on the sofa with her legs folded beneath her, talking to Derek about something I did not register, because every word she was saying was landing somewhere behind her voice on the deep wool red of the coat she was wearing over her shoulders, like it had always belonged to her. She had the collar turned up on the left side. I do not know if she had noticed that detail from a photograph or whether it was coincidence. Either possibility made my jaw tighten in a different way. "Walter," she said brightly when she saw me. "I hope you don't mind. I found this in the front closet, and it was getting chilly in here. You should really let us look at the heating system while we're up. I looked at my son. Derek met my eyes and then looked at his phone with the practiced ease of a man who has spent years learning to be elsewhere when a moment requires him to be present. Phew, that was Maggie's coat, I said. My voice came out level. I had not planned for it to sound that way. It simply did the way tools behave when you have used them long enough that your hands know what they are doing without instruction. Oh. Amber's expression moved through something I could not fully name, not embarrassment, not exactly. More like a recalculation, the same micro-adjustment I had seen at the kitchen table when I offered her coffee instead of answering her questions. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I'll put it back. She slipped it off her shoulders and folded it over the arm of the sofa. Not back to the closet. Over the arm of the sofa, the way you set aside something you intend to pick back up. I'll take it, I said, and crossed the room and picked it up and held it in my hands for a moment. The wool was still warm from her. That fact alone cost me something I do not have a clean word for. I put the coat back in the closet. I closed the door. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on because I needed something to do with my hands that was not what my hands wanted to do. Caroline arrived at 2. She came through the back door and found me at the kitchen table, and she sat down across from me without saying anything about the coat, because she understood that I already knew and that I did not need the information delivered twice. "You're going to call Harold," she said. Again, not a question. "Tonight," I said. She nodded. She cut 2 pieces from the apple cake she had brought, put one in front of me, kept one for herself. "Maggie would say you waited long enough," she said. "Maggie," I said, "would say I should have called him 3 weeks ago." Caroline almost smiled. She would have been right. Derek and Amber left at 4:30. I watched Amber go to the coat closet when she was gathering her things. Her hand rested on the door handle for just a second before she reached past it for her own jacket. Just a second, but I saw it. That evening, I called Harold Brandt at home. He answered on the second ring. "Harold," I said, "I need to come in." "When?" he said. "Thursday," I said. "And Harold, I don't want to discuss this with anyone beforehand. Not Derek, not anyone." There was a brief pause on his end. The kind of pause Harold makes when he already knows most of what you are about to tell him and is simply waiting for you to arrive at the part where you are ready to act on it. "Thursday at 10, he said. "I'll have coffee." I hung up and sat in the study in the dark for a while, holding the empty hanger from the coat closet in both hands, turning it slowly the way you test the weight of a piece of wood before you decide what it is good for. Harold Brandt's office had not changed in 35 years. That was not an exaggeration or a figure of speech. The same dark wood paneling lined the walls. The same brass desk lamp sat at the same angle on the same mahogany desk. The same rows of legal volumes stood in the same shelves arranged by subject, and then by year, the spines slightly faded where the afternoon light came through the west window. Harold had added a computer at some point in the last decade, but it sat on a side table rather than the main desk, as though it had been admitted to the office on probation and had not yet fully earned its place. Maggie and I had signed the papers for the Elmwood Drive house at that desk 40 years ago. I had sat in the same leather chair across from Harold when we updated our wills after Derek was born, when we revised them again after Derek turned 30, and certain things had become clearer about the shape of his life. I knew the particular creak the chair made when you shifted your weight to the left. I knew that Harold kept peppermint candies in the top right drawer and offered them to clients at the end of difficult meetings. He poured coffee from a thermos on the credenza and set a mug in front of me without asking how I took it, because he had known how I took it for 3 decades. "Tell me what happened," he said. I told him. I started with the questions at the kitchen table and worked forward through the Thanksgiving photographs, the overheard conversation with the cousin, the red coat. Harold listened the way he always listened, without interrupting, without reacting visibly, his pen making occasional small marks on the yellow legal pad in front of him that I had never once been able to read upside down. When I finished, he set the pen down and was quiet for a moment. "Walter," he said, "what Margaret arranged 4 years ago protects the assets from passing to the wrong hands after you are gone. What it does not do is protect you from being pressured into transferring those assets while you are still here. Those are two different problems." "I understand that," I said. "There is a tool that addresses the second problem," Harold said. "It is called an irrevocable trust. I want to explain it to you plainly without the legal scaffolding so you can decide whether it is what you want." I told him to go ahead. "Right now," Harold said, "you are the owner of the house on Elmwood Drive and the investment accounts. Your name is on those assets. That means that if someone applied enough pressure, emotional pressure, legal pressure, the kind of pressure that comes from being 72 years old and grieving and surrounded by people who want something from you, there is a version of events where you sign something you should not sign. Not because you are not sharp, you are sharp, but because pressure works on sharp people too, given the right circumstances and enough time." I looked at my coffee. "An irrevocable trust works like this," Harold continued. "You transfer the house and the accounts into a trust, a separate legal entity that holds the assets according to rules you set today. Once those assets are in the trust, they no longer belong to Walter Grayson, the individual. They belong to the trust, and the trust is managed by two signatures, yours and mine, as co-trustee." He paused to let that land. "What that means in practical terms is that even you cannot casually sign those assets away. Your signature alone is not enough. Mine is required as well. Any document that purports to transfer or encumber the trust property with only your signature is legally void. It transfers nothing." I thought about a woodworking principle I had applied 1,000 times. When you want a joint to hold under pressure, you do not rely on the strength of one piece of wood. You cut the pieces so that the pressure itself drives them tighter together. The load-bearing capacity comes from the geometry, not just the material. "So the protection is structural," I said. Harold looked at me with the expression he reserves for moments when a client has understood something precisely. "Exactly," he said. "The protection is structural." We spent 2 hours going through the documents. Harold had prepared them in advance, which told me he had known this conversation was coming, before I did, or had at least considered it likely enough to prepare for. The trust was named the Elmwood Property Trust. Harold's suggestion, a neutral name that would appear on county records without advertising any connection to the Grayson family. "If someone searches the property records," Harold said, "they will see the Elmwood Property Trust as owner of record, a common name. It will not immediately signal to a real estate professional that the property has been moved into a protective structure." I thought about Amber and her county record searches and said nothing. I signed the documents. Harold signed as co-trustee, his paralegal notarized. The whole thing was witnessed by two people who had no connection to my family and no stake in the outcome, which Harold told me was important for exactly that reason. When it was done, Harold walked me through one additional step, the county recorder's title alert service. A free notification system available in most Iowa counties that sends an email whenever any document is filed against a specific property parcel. Harold described it simply. "It is a tripwire made of paperwork," he said. "If anyone files anything against the Elmwood Drive parcel, any deed, any lien, any claim, you will know about it within 48 hours. I signed up for the alert on Harold's office computer before I left. On the drive home, I stopped at the hardware store on Mason Street and bought 2 new deadbolt sets. I changed the locks myself that afternoon, the way I had changed every lock in that house over 40 years, with a drill I had owned since 1987, and a level I checked twice because my father had taught me that a lock hung crooked is an insult to the door. I kept 1 new key for myself. I hung the spare on the 9th hook of the key cabinet in the hallway, the cabinet Maggie had mounted there 20 years ago, with its small typed labels on each hook in her precise handwriting. I had added the 9th hook myself the previous spring, when we acquired a key we had not had a hook for. I stood in the hallway and looked at that cabinet for a moment. 9 hooks, 9 keys, every one of them accounted for. 3 days later, Amber called to ask again about the name on the property paperwork. I told her I had spoken to a lawyer and that everything was being handled. She laughed lightly and said that was very responsible of me. I agreed that it was. I started going through Maggie's things in January. I want to be clear about why I waited as long as I did. It was not avoidance exactly, though avoidance was part of it. It was more that I understood in the practical way of a man who has worked with his hands his whole life, that some materials need time before you can work with them. You do not plane green wood. You do not sand a joint before the glue has fully cured. You wait for the right conditions, and then you begin. 3 months felt like the right conditions. I started with the easier things: the books on her nightstand, the reading glasses she kept in 4 different rooms, because she could never remember where she had set them. The collection of decorative plates her mother had left her that I had always considered hideous and that I was now completely unable to part with. I wrapped each plate in newspaper and set it in a box labeled Keep in the black marker Maggie used for everything, because I had inherited her labeling system along with everything else. Caroline came on a Saturday to help. She did not offer advice about what to keep or let go. She carried boxes, made coffee, and told stories about Maggie that I had not heard before, small ones, the kind that exist in the spaces between the big memories. The time Maggie had driven 40 minutes to return a library book that was only 2 days overdue because she said late fees were a tax on disorganization, and she refused to pay it. The way she always tipped exactly 25%, because she had read somewhere that 20 was no longer enough, and she had not revised the calculation upward since 2009. I laughed at those stories in a way that hurt and helped simultaneously, which is the particular arithmetic of grief that nobody warns you about adequately. We finished the bedroom in the early afternoon. The closet took longer. I moved through it methodically, the way I move through any task that requires precision, left side to right, top shelf to bottom, nothing skipped. The red coat went into a box by itself. I sealed the box with tape and wrote Maggie red coat on the outside and set it on the shelf above the hanging rod, where I would not have to see it every morning, but would know exactly where it was. The sewing box was on the top shelf of the closet behind a stack of extra blankets. It was a wooden box, medium-sized, painted pale blue with a hinged lid and small brass hinges that Maggie's mother had given her the year we were married. I had seen it 1,000 times. I lifted it down and set it on the bed to sort through the contents: spools of thread, a pincushion shaped like a tomato, several pairs of scissors in varying sizes, a collection of buttons in a small glass jar. Underneath the buttons, beneath a folded piece of felt, was an envelope. It was sealed. My name was on the front. Not Walt. Walter. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Caroline appeared in the doorway, took one look at what was in my hands, and said quietly, "I'll be downstairs." I heard her on the steps, then in the kitchen, then the particular sound of the kettle being filled. She understood the way people understand when they have lost someone too, and know what certain moments require. I opened the envelope. Maggie had written 4 pages in her steady, deliberate hand, dated the previous April, 6 months before she died. She began the way she began everything important, without preamble, without apology, getting directly to the point. She wrote that she had been watching something develop over the past 3 years that she did not know how to discuss with me without causing a problem she was not sure she could fix. She wrote that she had heard Amber on the phone in our guest room during a visit the previous Christmas, the bedroom door not fully closed, the voice carrying more than Amber had intended. She wrote the exact words she had heard. When are the old people going to stop making everything so complicated? Once they're gone, we can finally breathe. She wrote that she had stood in the hallway outside that door for a full minute without moving. Then she had gone downstairs and finished making lunch and not said one word about it for 6 months. Because she knew that if she told me, I would confront Derek, and confronting Derek directly would accomplish nothing except making Amber more careful. She wrote that she had gone to see Harold in April without telling me because she had already decided what she wanted to do and did not want to spend the time she had left arguing about it. She wrote that she was sorry for not telling me and that she was not sorry for what she had done. She wrote, I know you, Walt. You would have wanted to handle it by talking. But some things cannot be talked into a different shape. They can only be built around. She wrote about Derek carefully without cruelty, with the particular heartbreak of a mother who has watched her child become someone she did not intend to raise. She wrote that she believed Derek was not a bad man, but that he had spent too long letting someone else make his decisions, and that this was its own kind of failure, and that she had not known how to correct it while she was alive. She wrote that she hoped I would be patient with him without being a doormat about it. She said those exact words, patient without being a doormat. I had to stop reading for a moment after that. At the end, she wrote, the house is yours because you earned it. 40 years of Saturdays. 40 years of showing up. I know what that is worth, even if no one else in this family has stopped to calculate it. You take care of that porch swing. I picked it out myself, and I want it to outlast both of us. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after I finished reading. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, at the garden going gray and flat in the January light, at the porch swing visible at the corner of my line of sight, and I said out loud to the empty room, in a voice that came out steadier than I expected, I understand, Maggie. I've got it from here. Downstairs, the kettle clicked off. Caroline called up that tea was ready. I folded the letter along its original creases, put it back in the envelope, and carried it downstairs with me. Frank Delaney had a talent for appearing at the exact moment a story needed a witness. He knocked on my back door at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon in January, the way he always did before our chess game, holding his own thermos, because he had strong opinions about coffee and did not trust anyone else's. He stamped the snow off his boots on the mat outside, came in without waiting to be invited the way people do after 30 years of backdoor friendship, and set his thermos on the counter with the particular care of a man handling something valuable. Before we play, he said, hanging his coat on the hook by the door, I need to tell you something I saw yesterday. I poured my own coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Tell me. Frank pulled out the chair across from me and lowered himself into it with the careful deliberateness of a 74-year-old man who has learned not to trust his knees on cold days. He wrapped both hands around his thermos and looked at me directly, which was Frank's way of signaling that what he was about to say was not the kind of thing he was going to soften. Yesterday afternoon I was out clearing the snow off my front walk, he said. Amber's car was in your driveway. She came out the front door around 2 o'clock and stood on your porch making a phone call. Walter, I was not trying to listen, but she was not trying to be quiet. What did she say? I asked. Frank set his thermos down. She was talking to someone at a place called Sunrise Senior Living. She was asking about room availability and monthly rates. She told whoever she was speaking to that her father-in-law was 72 years old, living alone in a large home, and that the family had concerns about his ability to manage independently. Frank paused. She used the phrase independent living assessment, and she said, and I am giving you her exact words here, that the family was hoping to facilitate a transition in the coming months. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Outside, a cardinal landed on the feeder Maggie had hung from the eave of the garage 12 years ago and had never once let go empty. I watched it for a second, then looked back at Frank. She said, facilitate a transition, I said. Those were her words, Frank said. I wrote them down when I got home because I wanted to make sure I had them right. He reached into his shirt pocket and produced a small, folded piece of paper, the kind torn from a spiral notebook, and slid it across the table. His handwriting was the careful, slightly formal print of a man who had written on blackboards for 34 years. Facilitate a transition in the coming months. Sunrise Senior Living. It was dated and timed. Frank Delaney had been a history teacher. He understood the importance of a record. I folded the paper and put it in my own shirt pocket next to Harold's card, which I had been carrying there since December. Thank you, I said. There is one more thing, Frank said. While she was on the phone, she mentioned that Derek was working on the paperwork side of things. She said it like it was already in progress, like there was a paperwork side of things to work on. I thought about the document Derek had left on my kitchen counter 3 weeks ago, the one I had read and not touched and not mentioned to anyone. It was still in the drawer of the cherry desk exactly where I had put it, waiting for whatever it was waiting for. I know, I said. Frank studied me across the table. He had known me long enough to understand when I was telling him the whole truth, and when I was telling him the operative portion of it. Walter, he said carefully, how much of this have you already handled? Enough, I said, but not all of it yet. He nodded slowly, picked up his thermos, and stood. Chess, he said. Chess, I said. We had moved the board to the living room, and Frank was setting up the pieces when the back door opened and a voice called out. Grandpa, with the particular inflection of a teenager who is not entirely sure of his welcome but is hoping for the best. Tyler came around the corner from the kitchen, carrying his backpack on one shoulder and a paper bag from the bakery on Cedar Street in the other hand. He was 16 years old, nearly as tall as his father, but narrower through the shoulders with Maggie's coloring and Derek's way of standing slightly uncertain in doorways until he knew the room was safe. When I was on my way home from school, he said, I got you those cinnamon rolls from the place Grandma liked. Is that okay? I should have called. It's okay, I said. You don't need to call. Something in his shoulders came down about an inch. He set the bag on the coffee table and noticed Frank. Hi, Mr. Delaney. Tyler, Frank said, extending a hand that Tyler shook with a firmness that made Frank raise his eyebrows slightly in approval. Tyler sat on the edge of the sofa and watched us play for 20 minutes, eating one of the cinnamon rolls and asking occasional questions about the game that revealed he had been paying closer attention than he appeared to be. He had Maggie's quality of quiet, interested observation, the ability to be present in a room without demanding anything from it. Before he left, he stood in the kitchen doorway with his backpack resettled on his shoulder and said in the careful voice of a teenager navigating something he does not fully understand, Grandpa, are you okay? Like actually okay? I looked at him for a moment. 16 years old, Maggie's eyes. I'm working on it, I said. But yes. He nodded like that answer was sufficient, which told me he was smarter than his years suggested. After Tyler left, Frank moved his bishop and said without looking up from the board, That boy did not know he was going to come here today. He just came. I know, I said. There's a difference, Frank said, between people who show up because they want something and people who show up because they want to show up. I moved my rook. I know that too, I said. Frank captured my rook immediately. I had not been paying sufficient attention to the board. I have always been a light sleeper. Maggie used to say it was an occupational hazard of 40 years in a workshop, that a man who spent his days listening for the sound a blade makes when it is about to bind in the wood develops ears that do not fully switch off even at 2 in the morning, even decades after he has put the tools away for the night. I never argued with her. She was usually right about the reasons behind things I did not fully understand about myself. Derek and Amber had stayed late that Friday evening, later than usual. We had eaten dinner, watched part of the basketball game that none of us were particularly invested in, and somewhere around 10 o'clock I had told them I was tired, and going up to bed, which was true. I was tired. I was also, by that point in January, deeply accustomed to saying the true thing that was also the useful thing, the thing that gave other people room to be exactly who they were when they thought no one was watching. I was not asleep when I heard them. I had been lying in the dark for perhaps 40 minutes in that specific wakefulness that comes when your body is tired and your mind has decided it has more important things to attend to, when I heard Amber's voice carry up from the living room below. Not loudly, she was not shouting. But the house on Elmwood Drive was built in 1952 with plaster walls and original hardwood floors, and the particular acoustic quality of construction from an era when insulation was an afterthought, and voices traveled through it the way water travels through old pipe-finding channels you would not have predicted. I lay still. "We are running out of time on this," Amber said. Her voice had none of the warmth she kept in reserve for rooms she knew I was in. It was a different voice, entirely flat, efficient, stripped of performance. "The longer we wait, the more likely he does something we can't undo. He's not going to do anything." Derek's voice lower, with the particular quality of a man who has been having a version of this conversation for longer than he wants to admit. He's 72 years old, and he just lost Mom. He's not sitting up there making financial plans. "You don't know that," Amber said. "You don't know what he's doing. That's the problem." A pause. I heard the sound of someone sitting down on the sofa, the familiar creak of the left cushion that had been saying the same thing for 11 years. "What do you want me to do, Amber?" Derek said. "He's my father. I want you to talk to him," she said. "Directly. Tell him that the house is too much for one person. Tell him we're worried about him rattling around in $895,000 worth of property that he can't maintain on a fixed income. Tell him the responsible thing is to think about consolidating before it becomes a crisis." "He maintains it fine," Derek said quietly. "He redid the back porch last summer by himself." "Derek." Her voice took on the particular edge it gets when she has moved past persuasion into something closer to instruction. "Your mother is gone. The house goes to him, and then it goes to us. That is the natural order of things. All I am asking is that we help that process happen in an organized way while he is still well enough to participate in it, instead of waiting for a situation where we have no control at all." The natural order of things. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth very gently, the way I had taught myself to do in certain moments, so that whatever sound wanted to come out had somewhere to go that was not into the room. "We don't know for sure that the house goes to us," Derek said. His voice had dropped another register, the way it does when he is saying something he already knows the answer to and does not like it. "Mom might have arranged something different. We never actually asked." "And then maybe," Amber said, "it is time to ask." A long silence, longer than the others. Then Derek said something I had not expected and have not forgotten. He did not say it with confidence or with the casual certainty of a man who has already made up his mind. He said it with the tired, hollow resignation of a man who has let someone else make his mind up for him so many times that the process has become indistinguishable from his own thinking. "Fine," he said. "I'll bring the paperwork next week." I heard Amber exhale not a sigh of relief, exactly more the controlled breath of someone who has been managing a project and has received a status update that allows them to move to the next phase. I had heard contractors make that sound over the years, when a permit came through or a delivery was confirmed. It was the sound of logistics, not emotion. I lay in the dark for a long time after that. I want to tell you that I was angry. Anger would have been clean, would have had edges I could work with the way a sharp chisel has edges. What I actually felt was more like the moment in a piece of wood when you realize the grain has been running the wrong direction the whole time, and every cut you made was working against the material, not with it. A long, structural sadness. Not at what they were planning. I had seen that coming clearly enough. But at the sound of my son's voice saying fine the way a man says fine when he has stopped believing he deserves to say anything else. The boy who had sat in the workshop on Saturday mornings handing me tools had grown into a man who handed over his own conscience with the same uncomplaining efficiency. In the morning I made breakfast for all three of us. Eggs, toast, coffee. I set the table the way Maggie had always set it, everything in its place. Derek came downstairs first and said good morning, and I said good morning and poured him coffee. Amber came down 10 minutes later in her robe and said the eggs smelled wonderful, and I said thank you and put a plate in front of her. I was very pleasant through all of it. When they left at noon, Derek hugged me at the door, the same hug he had given me at the funeral, holding on a second longer than usual. I let him. He pulled back and looked at my face as though he was trying to read something there. And I gave him nothing to read because I had been a carpenter for 40 years, and I knew how to keep a surface smooth even when the material underneath it was working. I closed the door. I went to the cherry desk. I took out Harold's card. I did not call him that day because I was not ready, but I held it in both hands for a long time, the same way I hold a piece of wood before I decide what it needs. Derek came on a Wednesday afternoon, which told me something by itself. Derek had never once in 33 years shown up on a Wednesday. Weekends occasionally. Holidays when required. Wednesdays belonged to the middle of his working week, to the distribution center in Des Moines, to the ordinary machinery of a life that did not include his father, unless a specific purpose had been identified. The fact that he had rearranged a Wednesday meant the paperwork Amber had mentioned was on a schedule, and the schedule had apparently been moved up. He came alone, which told me something else. Amber's absence was not an accident. I had spent enough time watching the two of them operate to understand their division of labor. Amber planned and directed. Derek executed, particularly in situations where a softer presentation was required, where the presence of a daughter-in-law might create a friction that a son could navigate more easily. She had sent him alone because a son asking his father to sign paperwork reads differently than a couple arriving together with a folder. He knocked, which he had not done in weeks. They had developed a habit of walking in Derek, calling out as he came through the door, treating the house with the casual familiarity of people who have already decided it belongs to them. The knock told me he was nervous. Nervous people remember their manners. I opened the door. He was holding a manila folder under his arm and wearing the expression of a man who has rehearsed what he is about to say and is hoping the rehearsal holds. "Hey, Dad," he said. "You got a few minutes?" I told him to come in. We sat at the kitchen table. He set the folder down between us but did not open it immediately, which meant he had also rehearsed the approach and intended to work up to it. He asked about my knee, which had been bothering me in the cold. He asked whether I had called the furnace company about the annual service. He asked with the careful casualness of a man asking something that is not casual at all, whether I had given any more thought to my longer-term plans for the property. I told him my knee was fine. I told him I had called the furnace company. I told him I had not given much thought to longer-term plans. He nodded and opened the folder. "I've been talking to a lawyer," he said, which was interesting because the lawyer he had been talking to was presumably not Harold Brandt. "Just to get a sense of things. And there are some documents it would make sense for you to have in place. For your own protection, really. In case something happens and someone needs to be able to make decisions on your behalf." He laid 3 pages on the table between us. The top page had a header that read, "Medical and Financial Power of Attorney in Clean, Professional Type." Beneath it, 2 more pages stapled together, which I did not yet touch. I want to explain what a document like this actually is, because the name is designed to sound protective rather than predatory, and in legitimate circumstances it can be exactly that. A power of attorney authorizes another person to make legal and financial decisions on your behalf if you become unable to make them yourself. It is a reasonable document for an elderly person living alone to have in place, signed in favor of a trusted family member, witnessed and notarized, executed with full understanding of its contents. What Derek had placed in front of me was not exactly that. I reached out and touched the top page with 2 fingers, the way I touch a board I am assessing for hidden damage, feeling for what the surface does not show. Then I sat back in my chair and let my hands begin to tremble. It was a small tremor, controlled but convincing. I had practiced it 3 times in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, watching my hands until the movement looked like something that happened to me rather than something I was doing. 40 years of fine motor work had given me a precise understanding of what unsteady hands look like, and I used that understanding now in the opposite direction. "These are a lot of pages," I said. I let my voice go soft at the edges, slightly slower than usual, the way voices go when a man is tired and a little overwhelmed and not quite tracking everything being put in front of him. "What am I signing exactly?" Derek leaned forward. "It's just a power of attorney, Dad. Standard stuff. It means if you ever get sick or need help, I can take care of things for you. Pay bills, manage the property, make sure everything keeps running." I picked up the pages with both hands, let them tremble slightly as I held them. I looked at the top page for a long moment. Then I turned to the second page slowly, as though reading carefully, and let my eyes move across the lines in a pattern that suggested comprehension, without quite achieving it. The second page was not standard. Beneath the medical directives language in a smaller font that required attention to isolate from the surrounding text was a clause authorizing the transfer of real property held in the principal's name to the designated agent. It was not prominently labeled. It was not separately explained. It was folded into the body of the document, the way a carpenter hides a knot in a finished piece, visible to someone who knows what to look for, invisible to someone who trusts the surface. I set the pages down. I pressed both hands flat on the table. Let the tremor continue for a moment, then looked up at Derek with the expression of a man whose eyes are slightly unfocused, slightly overwhelmed, slightly grateful to have a son who handles things. "This is a lot to take in," I said. "My eyes aren't what they were." I pushed the pages gently back toward him. "Let me hold on to these. Give me a few days to look them over when I'm fresh. Maybe I'll have Caroline sit with me and we can go through it together." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sure," he said. "Of course. Take your time." He left the folder on the table when he went, which meant he intended to come back for it with a pen. I sat at the kitchen table for a full minute after his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I stood up, walked to the folder, and read every word of every page with the full attention of a man who had been reading technical documents his entire working life. The property transfer clause was on page 2, paragraph 4, sentence 3, 8 lines of text designed to be skipped by someone who trusted the title of the document they were signing. I called Harold that evening. I read him the clause over the phone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said in the tone he reserves for situations that are both serious and clarifying, "Walter, bring that folder to my office tomorrow morning." I told him I would. Then I asked the question I had been circling for 3 days. "Harold," I said, "how fast can we move if we need to?" Harold's office the next morning felt different than it had in December. In December, I had come in carrying a decision I had already made, needing only the legal machinery to execute it. That morning in February, I came in carrying something heavier, the folder Derek had left on my kitchen table, and the question of how much further this was going to go before it stopped. Harold was already at his desk when I arrived. He had the yellow legal pad open, the pen uncapped, the coffee poured. He took the folder from me without a word, spread the pages across his desk, and read them with the focused, unhurried attention of a man who has spent 45 years learning exactly where in a document the important things are hidden. After 4 minutes, he set the pages down and looked at me. "The transfer clause is unenforceable against the trust," he said. "You know that. Even if you had signed this document, the property it purports to transfer has not been in your individual name since December. The clause would be void for the same reason a bill of sale is void when the seller does not own the thing being sold." "I know," I said, "but I want to understand what they can still do." Harold picked up his pen and turned to a fresh page on the legal pad. "There is one avenue remaining that does not require your signature," he said. "I want you to know about it before they use it, because it will feel more alarming than it actually is. And I would rather you hear it from me in this office than read it in a letter from a courthouse." He explained it plainly, the way he explained everything. A guardianship petition filed in Iowa District Court is a request for the court to appoint a guardian to make legal and financial decisions on behalf of a person. The petitioner claims lacks the capacity to make those decisions independently. Any adult can file such a petition against any other adult. The filing itself requires no proof, only an allegation and a filing fee. The court then appoints an independent evaluator to assess the subject's cognitive capacity, schedules a hearing, and makes a determination. If Derek files this petition, Harold said, "and I believe he will, you will receive a formal court notice. It will look serious. It will have a case number and a court date and language about your competency. And it will arrive at your home on Elmwood Drive in an envelope that will feel when you pick it up like something has gone very wrong." "But it hasn't," I said. "But it has not," Harold agreed. "Because the petition requires proof you cannot provide independent judgment. You are 72 years old, in good health, in full possession of your faculties, with no diagnosis, no documented incidents, and a personal physician who has been treating you for 19 years and will say so in writing." He made a note on the legal pad. "I will file our response the same day the petition arrives. I will attach your physician's current evaluation, your financial records demonstrating active and competent management, and a summary of the trust documents you executed in December, which demonstrate forward legal planning of a kind that is not consistent with cognitive impairment." How long before they dismiss it?" I asked. 3 to 4 weeks from the date of our response," Harold said. "Possibly less, given the clarity of the record." He set his pen down. "Walter, I want you to understand what this petition actually is. It is not a legal strategy that can succeed. It is a pressure strategy. They are hoping that the sight of a court document with your name on it will cause you to make a decision out of fear that you would not make out of reason. They are using the machinery of the legal system as a bluff. I thought about that for a moment. In woodworking, there is a technique called a kerf. Cut a shallow saw cut made in the back of a piece of wood to allow it to bend without breaking. The cut looks like damage. It is actually control. What Derek and Amber were doing had the same structure. The petition looked like a threat. It was actually an admission that every other approach had failed, that they had run out of tools that could actually work, and had moved on to the ones that only looked like they could. File the response the day it arrives, I said. Whatever day that is. I will have it ready in advance, Harold said. We will be waiting for it. I drove home along the river road, the way I always did when I needed the extra 15 minutes of thinking that the longer route provided. The February light was flat and white over the water, the kind of light that makes everything look temporary, like a sketch rather than a finished thing. I had lived in Cedar Falls long enough to know that this particular light always preceded the last hard freeze of the season. The one that felt like winter making a final argument before it conceded to spring. I pulled into the driveway on Elmwood Drive, went in through the back door, and hung my coat on the hook. Then I walked to the hallway. I do not know what made me stop at the key cabinet. I had not been thinking about it. I had been thinking about Harold's explanation, about kerf cuts, about the flat white light on the river. But something made me stop the way something makes you stop at a joint you have passed 100 times when the light hits it differently, and you see for the first time that it has been working loose. I stood in front of Maggie's key cabinet with its 9 brass hooks and its small typed labels. 8 keys. I counted them again, slowly, hook by hook, the way you recount a measurement you do not believe the first time. Front door, back door, garage, workshop, mailbox, storage unit, Caroline's spare, Harold's office, and the 9th hook, the one I had added myself, the one with the label in Maggie's typewriter font that read, front spare, empty. The label was still there. The hook was still there. The key I had hung there myself in December. The new key for the new lock I had installed with the drill I had owned since 1987 was gone. My hand went to the cabinet door, steadied itself against the wood. I stood there without moving for a long time, running through the visits since December. Derek in the garage, Amber in the kitchen. The Tuesday afternoon I had been in the backyard with Frank, while Amber was inside making tea. The Sunday morning I had been in the workshop for 2 hours with the radio on. I could not determine the when or the who with certainty. But the what was clear enough. Someone had been in my house with a purpose, and the purpose had included the key cabinet in my hallway, and the spare key to my front door was now in someone else's pocket. I took my phone out and called Harold. He answered on the first ring this time. Harold listened to me describe the empty hook without interrupting. That was one of the things I had trusted about Harold Brandt for 35 years. He did not fill silence with reassurance. He let you say the complete thing, and then he said the useful thing, and those were not always the same thing, and he understood the difference. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When do you believe they will move?" I told him about the document Derek had left on my kitchen table. I told him about the moving timeline Amber had mentioned to her cousin at Thanksgiving, about the phone call to Sunrise Senior Living that Frank had overheard in January. I told him what Derek had said in the dark living room on that Friday night. Fine. I'll bring the paperwork next week. And then, because it was relevant and Harold needed the complete picture, I told him they had already tried the paperwork and it had not worked. Harold was quiet again for 3 seconds. "They have a key to your front door," he said, "and the paperwork approach has stalled. In my experience, Walter, when people who want something run out of ways to ask for it, they begin looking for ways to simply take it. That's what I think too, I said. How much time do we have? I thought about the folder left deliberately on my table, the key taken from a cabinet in my own hallway, the petition that was probably already drafted waiting for a signature. Amber did not leave projects half-finished. She was a closer. Every real estate transaction she had ever handled had ended with a signed document and a transfer of keys. I think they move by the end of the month, I said. Maybe sooner. Stam. Then we move first, Harold said. He did not say it dramatically. He said it the way you say, "Pass me that wrench," as the next logical step in a process that has been underway for some time and is now entering its final phase. Monday morning. I will be at your house at 7:15. Bring coffee. I told him I would. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a while in the particular quiet of a man who has made the last decision and is waiting for the calendar to catch up. There was a specific freedom in it that I had not expected. The preparing is its own kind of weight. Once the preparation is complete, the weight changes character. It does not disappear, but it becomes load-bearing rather than burdensome, the kind of weight that holds a structure together rather than pressing it down. Tyler knocked on the back door at 5:30. He came in stamping snow off his boots the way his grandfather had taught him, which is to say thoroughly and without being asked. He was carrying his backpack and a look of mild uncertainty that I had come to recognize as his standard expression when he showed up unannounced and was not entirely sure of his welcome, which was unnecessary, but which I had not yet fully convinced him of. "Is it okay?" he said. "It's always okay," I said. He sat at the kitchen table and I poured him a glass of milk, the way I had been pouring him glasses of milk since he was 4 years old, because some habits outlast the logic that started them, and neither of us had seen a reason to update this one. He drank it and looked out the window at the backyard, where the last of the February snow was going gray at the edges in the late afternoon light. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can always ask me something," I said. He turned his glass slowly on the table. 16 years old, with his grandmother's coloring and his father's uncertainty in doorways, and something else that belonged to neither of them, a kind of careful seriousness that I thought on good days might be his own. "Dad said something last week," he said. He was on the phone and I heard him say that the house situation was almost sorted out. He said it like it was a done deal. He looked up at me. "Is something happening with the house?" I looked at my grandson for a moment. 16. Old enough to deserve a real answer. Young enough that the real answer needed to be shaped with some care. "There are some people who think they know what's going to happen with this house," I said. "And there are some people who actually know. Those two groups are not the same people." Tyler processed that the way he processed most things, quietly turning it over, not rushing to a response. "Are you okay?" he asked. The same question he had asked in January. Simpler than it looked. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I know what I'm doing." Something in his face settled. Not relief, exactly, more like the specific reassurance of a young person who has been quietly worried about something and has just received confirmation that the adult in the room has it under control. He nodded, picked up his milk glass, finished it. He stayed for an hour. We talked about his history class, about a project he was doing on post-war American manufacturing, that I had more opinions about than he had expected. He laughed twice, real laughs, the kind that surprised him, which were the best kind. When he left, he paused at the back door with his backpack on and said, "Grandpa, whatever's going on, I'm on your side." 14 words. He said them simply, without drama, with the directness of someone who has not yet learned to make declarations complicated. "I know you are," I said. "Go home before it gets dark." After he left, I stood at the kitchen window and watched his car disappear down the street. Then I walked to the hallway and stood in front of the key cabinet one more time. 8 hooks, 8 keys, the 9th hook with its typed label and its absence. I thought about what Harold had said. They have a key, and the paperwork has stalled. And I thought about what that meant specifically, about what kind of Monday morning was coming. Then I went to the garage and found my drill, the one I had owned since 1987. I drove to the hardware store on Mason Street and bought a new deadbolt, the same brand as the last one, because I knew how it fit, and I did not have time to learn a new system. I installed it that evening by the hallway light, working by feel as much as by sight, the way you work when you know a task well enough that your hands carry most of the information. When I was done, I called Frank. "Friday night," I said. "Come for dinner. I need to tell you what's happening Monday." Frank said he would bring the wine, which was his way of saying he already knew something was happening and had been waiting to be included. I hung up, looked at the new lock, and went to bed earlier than I had in months. I slept the way I had not slept since October, fully without interruption, like a man whose preparations are complete and whose conscience is clear and who has nothing left to do but wait for morning. Sunday had always been Maggie's day. Not in a religious sense, though. We attended Cedar Falls Community Church with reasonable regularity for 30 years, and she sang in the choir with her screen door voice and meant every word of it. Sunday was hers in a more domestic sense, the day she set the pace for the day that had its own rhythm distinct from the rest of the week. She made a real breakfast on Sundays. She read the paper from front to back, including the parts I skipped. She called her sister in Dubuque at 2 in the afternoon every week, without fail for as long as her sister was alive to answer. I had not found a Sunday rhythm of my own since October. Most of them had passed in the formless way of days that do not yet know what they are for. That Sunday had a purpose, and I moved through it the way I move through a project with a deadline, methodically, without rushing one task, completing cleanly before the next one began. I started in the kitchen at 7 in the morning with coffee and the legal pad Harold had given me in December, on which I had been keeping notes since then in my own shorthand, the compressed notation of a man who spent 40 years reading blueprints. I wrote down the sequence of the morning as I understood it. Harold arriving at 7:15, the trust documents, Deputy Morrison at the curb, Frank across the fence with whatever task he invented for himself that would keep him within eyeshot of Elmwood Drive. Then I put the legal pad away and got to work. I went through the house with my phone camera, the way Harold had suggested months ago, every room, every closet, every drawer left open to show its contents. I photographed the key cabinet in the hallway, the 9 hooks visible, the 8th hook empty where the spare had been. I photographed the back door where I had noticed faint marks near the lock plate 2 weeks ago. Shallow indentations in the wood that had the look of something tried and abandoned, a harder approach, set aside once a softer one became available. I photographed the folder Derek had left on my kitchen table, still in the drawer of the cherry desk, exactly where I had placed it, untouched and unsigned. Every photograph was time-stamped automatically. I had Harold's office email the set to him before 10 o'clock. At 11, I drove to the Cedar Falls Savings Bank on 1st Street and rented a safe deposit box. I put Maggie's letter inside it, the one from the sewing box, in its resealed envelope with Tyler's name written on the front. I put her jewelry in beside it, the pieces she had worn every day, and the pieces she had saved for occasions that mattered. I put a copy of the trust documents and the original power of attorney folder Derek had left still in its original condition, unsigned. I locked the box and drove home. Caroline arrived at 1 in the afternoon with a pot of chicken soup she had made that morning, because Caroline understood that the day before something difficult requires practical nourishment more than symbolic gesture. She did not ask me to explain the sequence of what was coming. I had told her enough on the phone Friday evening that she understood the shape of it. and she had the particular quality of not needing to fill in every detail before she could be useful. We ate soup at the kitchen table, the same table where Amber had asked her careful questions in November, where Derek had laid his folder in February, where Walter Grayson had drunk bourbon alone in October and read a letter from his dead wife. A table accumulates history, the way wood accumulates grain layer by layer, invisible, until the light hits it right. "How are you feeling?" Caroline asked. "Ready?" I said. Which was true and also not the whole truth, and she knew both things simultaneously, the way people who have known you a long time know both things simultaneously without requiring you to reconcile them. "Maggie would be furious at Derek," she said. "Maggie would be patient with Derek," I said. "And she would be furious at Amber." Caroline almost smiled. "You're right," she said. In that order. She stayed until 4. When she left, she held my hand at the back door for a moment. Not a dramatic gesture, just a brief, solid pressure, the kind that says I am here without requiring a response. After she left, I walked through the house one more time, not photographing, just walking. The workshop in the basement where I had spent 30 years building things for other people's homes and a few things for my own. The study with the cherry desk and the brass lamp and the drawer that currently held nothing more threatening than a folder Derek had left, and an insurance policy and a business card I no longer needed to carry in my shirt pocket because the number was memorized. The hallway with Maggie's key cabinet and its 8 remaining hooks and the 9th one waiting. I sat on the porch swing at dusk. The temperature was dropping, the particular dry cold of a late February evening in Iowa that carries no moisture and makes sound travel differently. Makes the whole street feel closer and quieter simultaneously. I could see Frank's lights on across the fence. I could see the elm trees along the drive standing in the last gray light, the way they had stood for every one of the 40 years I had lived here. I thought about Maggie picking out this swing at the church sale, paying $30 for it, loading it into the back of the station wagon herself because I had been in the workshop and she had not wanted to wait. Hanging it herself with a level and 2 eye bolts and the calm competence of a woman who did not believe in waiting for help she could provide for herself. I thought about Derek at 6 years old, falling asleep on the living room floor with his head on the dog we no longer had in the house we had not yet finished making into the house it became. I thought about the 9th hook. I went inside when the cold became definitive. I made tea, sat in Maggie's chair, looked at her empty chair across from me. I had stopped apologizing to myself for talking to an empty chair months ago. Some habits are load-bearing. "Tomorrow," I said to the kitchen. The clock on the wall read 9:47. I washed my cup, turned off the lights in sequence the way I had done every night for 40 years, and went upstairs. I set my alarm for 6:15. Harold was coming at 7:15, and I wanted the coffee ready and the porch cleared of the last of the snow, and 1 hour of quiet before the day became what it was going to become. I did not lie awake. I was a man with a trust, a lawyer, a neighbor with a watering can, and 40 years of documented Sundays in a house that knew exactly who had earned it. I closed my eyes and slept. Before I reveal what happened next, leave a comment with the number 1 or the word ready, so I know you're still here with me. And please note, the story following this contains some fictional elements added for narrative purposes. If that's not what you're looking for today, feel free to turn off the video right here. I was on the porch with coffee at 7 o'clock. The morning was cold and clear, the particular clarity of early March in Iowa, when the air has given up its winter heaviness, but has not yet acquired the soft edge of spring. The elm trees along the drive stood still. No wind. The street was empty in the way streets are empty before the day has decided to begin, and I sat on the porch swing Maggie had bought at the church sale and drank my coffee and listened to Cedar Falls wake up one sound at a time. Harold's car turned onto Elmwood Drive at 7:14. He parked at the curb, not in the driveway, which I had not suggested, and which told me he had thought about the geometry of the morning in advance. He came up the front walk in his charcoal gray suit with his briefcase in one hand and a thermos in the other, and he moved with the unhurried precision of a man who has been doing important things for 45 years and has learned that urgency is almost always a performance and almost never a strategy. I handed him a mug from the tray I had set on the porch railing. He set his briefcase on the swing beside me, poured from his thermos, and sat down with the ease of a man settling into a chair he has occupied before, though he had not, in fact, ever sat on this porch before this morning. We did not talk about the case. We talked about the winter, about a restoration project the city was doing on the pedestrian bridge over the Cedar River, about a book Harold was reading on the history of Iowa land law that he described as drier than it sounds, but surprisingly compelling. It was the conversation of two men who have known each other long enough that they do not need to fill the time before something difficult with rehearsal or strategy. The preparation was done. What remained was waiting, and waiting is easier with company and coffee. Deputy Ray Morrison arrived at 7:50. He came in his personal vehicle, a dark blue pickup, and parked 2 houses down rather than in front of mine, which was another piece of geometry I had not requested and appreciated. He walked up the sidewalk in plainclothes jeans, a Cedar Falls PD jacket. The unhurried walk of a man who is present in an official capacity, but does not intend to make that capacity the first thing anyone notices. He nodded at Harold, nodded at me, accepted the third mug from the tray, and leaned against the porch railing with the practiced stillness of someone who has spent a career learning how to be visible without being intrusive. Harold looked at the mug tray. "You brought 3 mugs," he said. "I knew Ray was coming," I said. Harold nodded, unsurprised. This was, I think, one of the things he had always appreciated about me as a client, that I had done the geometry too. At 8 o'clock, Frank Delaney appeared at the side of his house with a pair of garden shears and began attending to a rose bush along his fence line. The rose bush was dormant. It had been dormant for 4 months and would remain dormant for another 6 weeks. Frank was a retired history teacher and understood better than most people the importance of being present at significant moments. And he had found over 30 years of living across from the Grayson house that gardening tools provided the most socially acceptable reason for standing outside in the cold, watching things happen on someone else's property. He did not look at the porch. He did not need to. He knew we were there. At 8:12, I heard the diesel engine. It was the specific low rumble of a large truck engine at low speed, the sound that carries differently than car engines through winter air, deeper and more deliberate. I had spent enough years around delivery trucks and construction sites to identify it before the vehicle turned the corner. Harold heard it too. I saw his hand move to his briefcase unhurried, the way a surgeon's hand moves to an instrument before an incision, not rushed, simply ready. The moving truck turned onto Elmwood Drive at 8:14 and pulled to the curb with one wheel riding up over the edge of the grass easement in front of my property, which struck me as either carelessness or symbolic. 2 men in work jackets climbed down from the cab and began unloading a dolly from the back with the mechanical indifference of workers who have been given a job and are doing it without particular investment in its outcome. Derek's truck pulled in behind the moving van. He came out of it wearing work gloves. Thick ones, the leather palm kind, the kind you put on when you want to look like a man who intends to move furniture. He was dressed for labor in a way I had not seen him dressed since he was 17 and helping me re-roof the garage on a summer weekend. And the sight of it did something to my chest that I did not have a clean name for. Not softness exactly, but the memory of softness, the ghost of a feeling that belonged to a different version of this morning than the one that was actually happening. Amber came out of the passenger side. She was carrying a manila folder and a key. Not her house key. The key she was holding was bright and new. The particular shine of metal that has not yet lived anywhere, not yet hung on any hook or sat in any pocket long enough to lose its newness. She had a quality about her, as she came around the front of the truck, that I can only describe as the confidence of a person arriving at a transaction they believe has already closed. She was dressed well professionally, the way she dressed for a listing appointment. She had come prepared to take possession of something. They made it halfway up the front walk. All four of them, Derek, Amber, and the two workers with the dolly, stopped at the same moment, with the particular synchronization of people who have encountered something their plan did not account for. The stopping had a physical quality to it, a sudden redistribution of momentum, the way water stops when it hits a wall it did not know was there. On the porch swing in his charcoal gray suit, with his thermos in his hand, and his briefcase open beside him, and 45 years of Iowa law arranged in a folder on his lap, sat Harold Brandt. Behind Harold, standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago because I had forgotten it was in my hand, stood Walter Grayson. At the curb, Deputy Ray Morrison set down his mug on the porch railing, straightened his jacket, and walked to the top of the porch steps. He did not speak. He did not cross his arms. He simply stood there at the top of the steps with his Cedar Falls PD jacket and his 31 years of law enforcement and the specific authority of a man who does not need to announce himself because his presence is already the announcement. Frank's garden shears stopped moving. Derek's mouth opened and then closed again. Amber's hand tightened around the new bright key until the knuckles went pale, and her professional smile, which had been in place since she stepped out of the truck, did not disappear so much as it suspended, held at the surface like a question that no longer had a ready answer. Harold set down his thermos. He stood up. Harold stood the way men stand when they have decided that what comes next belongs to them. Not tall, not aggressive, simply present with the particular density of a person who has spent 45 years being the most prepared person in any room they entered and had long since stopped needing to announce it. He picked up his folder from the swing. He squared the edges against his palm. He walked to the top of the porch steps and looked down at the four people frozen on my front walk. "Good morning," Harold said. "Which one of you is Derek?" Derek raised his hand. He raised it the way a man raises his hand when he is not entirely sure he wants the answer, that follows a small, uncertain gesture, the hand of someone who has just realized the floor beneath him is not what he thought it was. Amber's mouth opened. Harold raised one finger. Not rude, simply final, the unhurried gesture of a man who has heard 4 decades of people talk themselves into worse positions and has learned the precise moment to stop them. Amber closed her mouth. Her eyes moved to Deputy Morrison at the top of the steps, and then back to Harold, and I watched the calculation behind them run its numbers and come up empty. Harold opened his folder. "The property at this address," he said in the measured, carrying voice that did not need to be raised to reach every corner of the yard, "has been held by the Elmwood Property Trust since the 7th of December of last year. The trustees of record are Walter Grayson and myself." He turned to the first page and held it so Derek could see it clearly. What that means in practical terms is that this property has not been in Walter Grayson's individual name for nearly 3 months. He cannot unilaterally transfer it. I cannot unilaterally transfer it. Neither of us can act without the other's signature. He turned to the second page. "The document your wife is carrying," Harold said without looking at Amber, "purports to transfer property from an individual who does not own it in his individual capacity. It is void. Not voidable, void. It would transfer nothing even if Walter had signed it, which he did not, and even if the notary were present, which there is no notary. He paused. There is also the matter of the key. He looked at Amber directly for the first time. The key you are holding, Harold said, fits a lock that was changed in February of this year. The key that previously fit that lock was removed from a cabinet inside this home during a period when you or your husband were guests in this home. Taking a key from someone's property without their knowledge or consent is theft under Iowa Code Section 714.1. Using that key to enter or attempt to enter the property without the owner's permission is criminal trespass under Iowa Code Section 716.7. He said the statute numbers the way he said everything without drama as plain fact, the way you read a measurement off a tape. Deputy Morrison is here as a witness to this morning's events. Whether this proceeds further is not my decision. One of the two workers took a step backward toward the truck. Then the other one followed. The second man paused at the edge of the walk and looked up at me with the expression of a man who has accidentally walked into something he wants no part of and has decided the hourly rate does not cover it. "Sorry, sir," he said. I nodded at him. I had thought warmly of that stranger every day since. Derek had gone the color of February sky, flat, drained, without depth. He was not looking at Harold. He was not looking at Deputy Morrison. He was looking at me standing in my doorway with my cold coffee, and his face had the expression of a man waiting for the part he deserved. The raised voice, the pointed finger, the formal declaration of what he had done and what it had cost. I did not give him that part. Amber's folder slipped. She caught it, but her hands were shaking visibly now. The real kind, the kind that comes from the inside, rather than the kind I had practiced in front of a mirror, and she turned to Derek with the energy of a person who needs somewhere to put something that is too heavy to keep holding. "You said this would work," she said. Her voice had lost its professional warmth entirely. What was underneath it was something raw and less composed, the voice of someone who has built a plan on a foundation they did not personally inspect. "You said he would sign. You said the house was going to be ours." Derek did not answer her. He was still looking at me. I stepped off the porch. I walked down the front steps and across the flagstone path that I had laid myself in, the summer of 1998, stone by stone level, checked twice, because my father had taught me that a path laid crooked will trip you for as long as it exists. I walked until I was standing in front of my son. He was taller than me by 2 inches. He had been taller than me since he was 17, and had been quietly proud of it in the way sons are quietly proud of surpassing their fathers in small physical ways, while the more important measurements remain unexamined. He was wearing work gloves and a jacket with a broken zipper pull I had noticed 2 months ago, and had almost offered to fix and then had not, because we had stopped being the kind of father and son who said those things to each other somewhere along the way without either of us marking the moment it happened. I held out my hand. He looked at it confused. Then I reached out and opened his right hand, the one that had been clenched at his side, and placed the key from my own pocket into his palm. The spare I had cut that morning at the hardware store on Mason Street, bright and new, identical to the one Amber was holding, fitting the same lock. I closed his fingers around it. "Your mother and I spent 40 years building something," I said. My voice came out the way I had hoped it would, level without tremor, the voice I used for things that mattered enough to say once and not repeat. "Not just the house. All of it. We built it so that you would have somewhere to come back to, not somewhere to cash out." I looked at my son's face, at the redness climbing his jaw, at his eyes, which were filling in a way he was trying to prevent and failing. "The door is not closed to you, but what comes through it has to be you, not paperwork, not a plan, you, Derek's hand tightened around the key. His shoulders came forward, the particular collapse of a man whose structure has failed, and a sound came out of him that was not a word, that was something older and less formed than words, the sound of a person arriving at a cost they had not believed they would actually have to pay. Amber had already walked to the truck. Deputy Morrison wrote down his case number on a card and handed it to Harold, who handed it to me. The moving truck reversed off the grass easement and drove away. Frank's garden shears started moving again slowly in the direction of a rose bush he had already finished. I stood on my front walk in the March cold, holding a cup of coffee that had been cold for 40 minutes, and watched my son walk to his truck with a key in his fist and climb inside and sit there without starting the engine for a long time. I did not go to him. I had said the thing. The rest belonged to him. Derek drove away at 9 o'clock. I watched his truck until it turned the corner, and then I stood on the front walk for another minute in the March cold, holding my empty coffee cup, listening to Elmwood Drive return to its ordinary sounds. A dog somewhere on the next block. The school bus on Maple. Frank's garden shears still moving, unhurried, patient. "Coffee's cold," Frank said from his side of the fence. "Has been for an hour," I said. He nodded. "Come over when you're ready. I'll make a fresh pot." I told him I would. The weeks that followed sorted themselves the way things sort themselves after a long pressure has been released. Harold filed the formal trust documentation with the county recorder. The guardianship petition Derek had filed was dismissed without a hearing. The evaluator's report took 11 days and contained the words "fully competent" and "no evidence of impairment," which Harold said were the two most useful phrases in Iowa probate law, and which I wrote down on the legal pad and underlined once. Caroline brought soup on Thursdays. Frank lost 4 consecutive chess games and blamed the cold weather. Tyler came on Saturdays the way he had begun coming since January, with no announcement and no agenda, sometimes with something from the bakery on Cedar Street, sometimes with just himself, which was always enough. I did not hear from Derek. I did not hear from Amber. In April, I went to the hallway, took out Maggie's old typewriter from the study closet, and rolled a fresh label through it. The keys made the same sound they had always made, precise, deliberate, each letter a small commitment. I typed 2 words. I cut the label and pressed it onto the 9th hook. Then I went to the hardware store on Mason Street, had a new spare cut, and hung it in its place. The cabinet was full again. 9 hooks, 9 keys, every one of them accounted for. I stood in the hallway for a moment, in the particular quiet of a house that knows who belongs in it. Then I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and waited for Tyler, who had texted 20 minutes ago that he was on his way and was bringing the cinnamon rolls from the place his grandmother had liked. The label on the 9th hook read "Front Spare, Ask First." I thought Maggie would have approved of that. I used to think protecting what you love meant fighting for it loudly. I was wrong. The most powerful thing I ever did happened quietly. 2 signatures one Thursday morning. One lawyer who had known me for 35 years. Family justice does not always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a folder on a porch swing and a man in a charcoal suit drinking coffee before anyone else arrived. Here is what I want to say, directly from one person to anyone listening. Do not wait the way I waited. Do not keep making tea for people who are measuring your kitchen while you do it. I am grateful God gave me enough patience to act wisely instead of quickly, but I will not pretend the waiting did not cost me something real. These revenge stories about family are never really about the house or the money. They are about what happens when the people who were supposed to show up simply chose not to. Family justice means deciding quietly and without apology that love is not the same thing as surrender. If this story reached something in, you leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done differently. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe that quiet people sometimes have the strongest foundations, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying until the end. The stories that follow contain fictional elements created for reflection and life's deeper lessons if that is not what you are looking for tonight. No hard feelings. Choose what serves you best.